let's have a closer look at WrestleMania 10 and Bret versus Owen then. So we put up three matches, three options in a poll on our Facebook group, the Wrestling with Johners Facebook community page. And when I reached out to you, George, I said, look, I've got this idea for a watch along. What's your three most favorite matches of all time? Straight away, you didn't hesitate. Your first number one match was Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, WrestleMania 10. And now we know as we're talking about this, that won the poll. But there were two other options, and for those that voted, that the second option was Shawn Michaels versus Triple H from SummerSlam '02. And then Triple H again versus Cactus Jack in a Hell in a Cell match from No Way Out pay-per-view in the year 2000. So those were the three options, and Bret versus Owen won. It was all fairly tight at the end. They were racing ahead to start off with, but it was fairly tight. But Bret versus Owen for WrestleMania 10 did come out on top from the poll. And you said at the very beginning, George, that this was your favourite match of all time, or at least that's kind of reading between the lines what I gathered from our conversation. How happy were you when Bret versus Owen came out on the top of the poll, and you knew that you were going to be talking about that match on my show today?
Well, I was ecstatic. I mean, at first when you said give me three options, I only gave you one. I said, no, Bret versus Owen.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, I need three. And I was like, oh, fine.
That's how a poll works.
Yeah, I know. We should have just put all three up, and we could have done the commentary different. Watch it in German, watch it in Spanish, watch it in Chinese or something like that, right? But no, this when I saw the poll results, I shared it, and I saw it. I think it ended yesterday or this morning?
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah.
Yesterday. So when I saw that it won, I was like, perfect. That's the one I wanted anyways. I love the other two matches. They're great stories.
Yeah.
But this one is so ahead of its time in not so much the time period, but the story that these two technical juggernauts, laid out for us. You can literally put a young fan in front of I want to be a wrestler when I grew up. You want to be a wrestler? Cool. Watch this match. Dissect it, study it, learn everything in it. This is a match that can literally teach you everything you need to know about technical wrestling from two of the greatest of all time. And had Owen Hart tragically not passed away in 1999, who knows what we could have seen, the matches that we could have saw. I think about it all the time, man. Every time I turn on my PS4 and I rock out, WWE 2K19 is the most recent one I have because 2020 was garbage. But 2K19, every time I turn on, always go to Owen Hart, always flip him up from matches with, Kevin Owens, matches with, a match with Ric Flair, matches with, Shawn Michaels in later years. Daniel Bryan.
Oh, that would have been a tremendous match.
That's a match that literally would have been just like this, just 20 to 20 some odd years later.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they all sit in that realm, know.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, this was not only an excellent match, but it was one of the reasons why I'm really, really glad to be doing this watch along with you. Is because it had an excellent storyline build as well. So both the lead up to this match, which we'll get into in a moment, and not only the match itself at WrestleMania 10, but afterwards. The feud lasted for well over a year. I think it started around Survivor Series 1993. And if you remember, there was the Hart brothers. You had Owen, Bret, Keith, and Bruce. And they were the Hart brothers. And now originally they were going up against Jerry Lawler and his three knights. But Jerry Lawler got fired or left the WWF around that time. Shawn Michaels took his place. So the Hart brothers were going up against Shawn Michaels and the Knights. Now, the match was going really, really well. The Knights were getting eliminated in the Survivor Series match. It was down to the four Hart brothers and Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart got injured, didn't he, George? And he was kind of pacing along the side of the ring apron. And Owen Hart kind of got Irish whipped into him or ran into him, knocking Bret off the ropes. Then Shawn Michaels capitalized and then eliminated Owen Hart. And then I think the Hart brothers won the match because Shawn Michaels got himself counted out, I believe. And Owen Hart came back into the ring and berated Bret Hart, blaming him for him being the only Hart brother eliminated. But what were your memories of kind of just Survivor Series 1993? Because that was when the seed to this feud kind of started, wasn't it?
It was, and my memory is, like you just touched on, was right at the end when Owen Hart came back out, and I remember the three remaining Hart brothers hugging in the ring, and then Keith, Bruce, and Bret, and then Owen, storming back, storming right past Shawn Michaels, actually kind of like looking through him to the end game at the ring, and they were all hugging, and Owen came up and he pulled, he moved Bruce and Keith out of the way, and he just pushed him right away. He just got up in his face. I've always been in your shadow. You're always just berating him and yelling at him, and the passion in his face and the spit flying out of his mouth. I honestly think, as much as it was a great storyline, I think there was a lot of hidden truths there. I think there was a chance to get out a lot of frustration because Owen Hart had been left in Bret Hart's shadow. Even after Bret Hart left, a couple of years later, after the Montreal screw job, after he left and went to WCW and literally was not utilized properly because Eric Bischoff is a tard, Owen was still in the shadow, had to do all these other gimmicks to kind of find something from the Nugget, joining the Nation, to when he was, the American, the Blue Blazer, and led to his untimely death in Over the Edge, right? Yeah. So, always trying to carve out who he was. But if you look at this match, the reason why this is my favorite match of all time is because Owen Hart spoke his truth in this match. Leading up to it, the promos that were cut, even the after, from the steel cage match at SummerSlam later on in the year to, even through Rumble, leading all the way up to WrestleMania, Owen Hart spoke his truth to the fans. And the promos he cut were the most edgy and heartfelt and passionate promos I'd ever seen him cut before then or after then. And I honestly and truly believe a lot of this, as much as, it's his brother and he loves him behind the scenes and stuff like that, kayfabe was very real back then. So there was times where Owen could not be with the family at Thanksgiving or at Christmas because kayfabe was so real. Couldn't spend New Year's with his parents because Bret was over there. So you don't want to give away, behind the scenes stuff, right? Yeah. And this is just research that I've done over time. And even when I did my Owen Hart profile, that's one of the things we used to do every once a month in the early stages of Straight Talk. We used to do a profile on our favorite wrestlers. And right off the hop, I was like, I'm taking Owen. And I took it. I ran with it. And we did everything on it. And the research that I found was just incredible. But this match stands the test of time because the story that was told before and after and during. Like I said, this is a match, no matter how old you are, you could watch the build up to it, watch this match, and it'll leave you breathless. And if it doesn't leave you breathless, then you are not a true wrestling fan. Because this is, hands down, I don't know where it ranks. For me, it ranks number 1, but this is definitely top 10 all time. Most definitely. Everyone has their different top 10 or their different top 5. This, for me, ranks a greatest of all time. But, and in this match, like I said, he spoke his truth. But when you watch this WrestleMania match, he got the better of his brother almost 60% of the match. So if this came down to a draw and this was like a boxing fight, I believe he would have won the match by decision. Yeah. Split decision, mind you, but by decision. But this was a match where he told his truth and he got the better of his brother. And I think he showed the world that he was the better Hart. Yeah. And I love Bret Hart. I respect Bret Hart. I've met him. He's an amazing human being. But Owen Hart, during this year, showed the world who the better Hart was.
Yeah, definitely. After the Survivor Series in '93, Bret Hart and Owen Hart, they did reconcile as well. They hadn't quite fallen out fully. I know that the parents and the family were trying to keep them together, and and trying to prevent the inevitable, I suppose. And they did start a teaming as a tag team in various matches, and one match in particular, the Royal Rumble '94, where Bret and Owen went up against the Quebecers. Now, I think it was for the WWF tag team titles at the time. The Quebecers were the champions, and Bret and Owen had an opportunity to win the tag team titles. But I understand that Bret has sustained an injury during that match, which led to the match being stopped via referee decision, I believe, if I remember correctly. Owen was hard at Bret, Owen was angry at Bret for sustaining the injury, which I'm sure he couldn't help. It's a very hard fought match. What were your thoughts of that Royal Rumble encounter between the Quebecers and the Hart brothers? And that was kind of the moment where Owen officially turned heel, wasn't it?
It was. That was the moment where all the brothers came out, where his father, or I believe his mother, was in ringside.
Yeah.
And she cried real tears. You go back, you watch that match. She sold it better than anybody else. She cried real tears. And yeah, it was stopped because he sustained the injury.
Yes.
And again, he spoke his truth. And even though they had reconciled, they hadn't really reconciled, because if you watch the promos leading up to that Royal Rumble match, Owen, every time Bret spoke, Owen's eyes were looking through him. Like, I want to end you. Like, he sold it so well, to the point where you can look back and you can watch those promos dissect, even because WWE used to do that cheesy thing where they'd have the 3D graphic background in the back right before they went out. We're going to do this. We're going to show everybody that the Hart brothers are united and blah, blah, blah. Bret might have been united. Owen clearly showed that he wasn't. He sold it so well. And when the match got stopped, and it screwed him out of a chance to get the tag team titles, because they were winning that match until the Quebecers pulled their dirty shit that they usually did, and were able to steal one away. But most importantly was the fact that, I mean, one thing you got to touch on, at least I got to touch on because I'm a proud Canadian, is you had 4 Canadian boys in the ring at that time.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was huge, right? You had Calgary and Quebec being represented in full force. And it was just unfortunate that the injury happened, or the kayfabe injury happened, and it started the whole feud. But if you look back at that particular moment, the one that stands out to me for sure is his mother, their mother, crying real tears.
Yeah.
She looked like her heart broke, like her family was broken. She sold it so well, John. Like, I look back, and even now I'm sitting there, I'm getting kind of giddy, because I'm like, damn, Mama Hart, she had it going on. She knew how to sell it.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how much kind of real emotion. I know that she, obviously married to the legend Stu Hart, and all of the sons grew up to be wrestlers. So professional wrestling was ingrained in the family, and it makes you wonder whether I can't remember the mother's name now. Do you remember Stu's wife? It's a name that
I'm going to
escapes
get a
me.
lot of heat for this, because people are like, oh, you remember the great match, but you don't remember the build-up. I want to say it's either Judy or Helen
Hart. I
Yeah.
believe that's correct. But she did sell it so well, and it did make you wonder how much of that was real emotion, and how much she was genuinely, upset because her 2 sons were kind of, building a rivalry together. So, there was a lot of possibly real emotion intertwined there. But one of the classic lines that came out during this feud, I think after the Royal Rumble match, as Bret Hart was being wheeled on a gurney, his leg obviously in an awful lot of pain, being wheeled backstage. Owen was already kind of backstage. He was being interviewed by Todd Pettingill, if I remember correctly, and he came out with a classic line that Bret, I just kicked your leg out of your leg. And that's been a classic line ever since. Now, obviously, he stumbled over his words,
Right.
but that was kind of Owen Hart all over, wasn't it? Really, he was showing passion, he was showing emotion, and I kicked your leg out of your leg, Bret, and he kind of realised what he said and kind of didn't correct himself, but that's kind of a bit of a botch, or a line that's been synonymous with Owen Hart, but kind of for good reasons, I suppose. It kind of showed a human, a real side to Owen Hart during that promo.
100% agree with you. It was the passion in him, and I mean, when people talk passion, people talk their truth, they speak their truth, they stumble over their words, they're a stutter. Like me, when you can tell when I'm enjoying an interview, when I almost cut off who I'm interviewing just so I could get my next question out, because I'm just loving it. And that happens pretty much with all of my interviews. I just the passion that comes out when you're talking or doing something you love. It's very easy to stumble over your words and mispronounce things, or misinterpret the way things were supposed to be spoken. So I don't fault him for that. That's actually a memory that I mean, I recollect it, but it doesn't. It still doesn't overshadow the greatness that we're going to talk shortly about at WrestleMania 10. It doesn't overshadow anything about it, in my opinion, because the match. I mean, we talk about it all the time on my show when I have my former co-host. He was big on the talking. He was big on the build. That's what we called it. You know, you got to talk the talk, you got to build. I was big on walking the walk. And what the great thing about this storyline did is there wasn't a whole lot of talk because at the time there wasn't a weekly episodic show yet. So at the time, there was just the 4 pay-per-views. Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, WrestleMania, SummerSlam.
Yeah.
You only had the major 4 at the time. So there wasn't a whole lot of build. There was build leading up to it. They used to do the press conferences. There was build during the event. That's why they cut the promos at the event.
Yeah.
But there was not much of a build. The way WWE did their stuff back in the day was very much like indie wrestling does it now. You only really have a short amount of time. A lot of indie shows aren't on networks. So it's hard to build up a rivalry or build up a storyline in the indies. But this was a storyline that stood the test of time because it was built correctly. It was built in a time period where Vince McMahon was very involved in his business, not like now. And he was passionate about the storylines that he was sharing out, that he was letting out to the fans. And you could see it's the testament as it stands, test of time. And I urge any young fan listening to this interview, any young wrestler that's listening to this interview, if you don't know what we're talking about, turn off this interview right now, go watch the match, then come back and listen to the rest of the interview. Because I want to make sure Johners gets a lot of hits, and I want to make sure this is one of his strongest episodes, so both of our podcasts grow together.
Indeed. I mean, just sticking with that Royal Rumble 94, because as you're fully aware, to add even more fuel to the fire, Bret then went on to win, or was co-winner of the Royal Rumble, which enraged Owen Hart even more, made him even more jealous, and made Owen even more madder than he was before. So Bret continued to turn down challenges from Owen to fight him, and he wouldn't fight his brother. He kept refuting all of the challenges until he couldn't take any more, and he accepted a challenge from Owen. And then that leads us to this very match we're going to be talking about at WrestleMania 10, of course. So we know that Bret had a double kind of main event, or 2 matches at WrestleMania 10, and he would go on to kind of finish the show with the gold, having beaten Yokozuna, and essentially kind of turning the tale from WrestleMania 9 on its head, and kind of leaving as the champion. But the show WrestleMania 10, it opens with this match that we're going to be talking about very, very soon. So before we press play, and I'll kind of talk you through the watch-along process very, very soon, but was you surprised that Bret versus Owen was on first and that it kicked off the show?
As a kid, no, because I was like, sweet, the match I wanted to see is right off the hop. Then I can go eat pizza for 2 hours, forget about the ones I don't want to see, and go back and watch the main event. As a kid, I didn't really understand it fully, but as an adult now, I get it. But it's sad, really, because this should have not been the first match out. This should have not been the match that kicked off the show. What they should have done, and what would have been a true testament to Bret Hart, was have him wrestle Owen, second last match, then have him go after the world title. I think that would have been a true testament more to him and a true testament to his brother. But to have him wrestle at the beginning of the night and then again at the end of the night, it's a chance to recover, go back, drink some water, drink some Gatorade, what have you. I get why they did it. But let me pose a question to you. I know this is your podcast, but let me flip it. This will be the first time Johners has ever been asked a question on his own show. Do you remember the title match? Like, if you didn't go back and watch it, do you remember it? Yeah, you remember that Bret won. But do you remember how he won? Do you remember how it finished?
I do vaguely. What you're referring to, Bret Hart versus Yokozuna, the very final match?
Yeah, but what my whole point is
Was
that
it like a victory roll or something like that? But
it was exactly that. It was a victory roll. But
it's
you and
not
I
as
would
memorable.
know that.
It's not as memorable.
It's not as memorable.
No.
But if you talk about WrestleMania 10, you ask anybody about WrestleMania 10, they mention 2 things. They mention Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels ladder match, and they mentioned Bret and Owen.
Indeed.
Nobody else remembers any other match on that card, and that was a great WrestleMania. It was, but there's only really 2 matches that stand the test of time on that card, and it's Bret versus Owen and Shawn versus Razor.
Indeed, indeed. So, George, this is our first ever experience of doing a watch along. I don't think you've done one on your podcast. This is the first time I've done one on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. So, what we're going to do is we're going to urge our listeners to kind of watch the match with us as we're going through it, so we can all watch along and do a little bit of commentary over the top of what we're going to be viewing, and to kind of recollect our very fond memories of the match and certain highlights that really stand out to us as it's playing. So I'm going to urge all of my listeners to go to the WWE Network, fire up the network, go to the pay-per-view section, and there select WrestleMania from 1994. That's WrestleMania 10. And what you want to do is you want to skip to 10 minutes and 11 seconds. 10 minutes and 11 seconds. Now, if you go to WrestleMania 10, it's all in chapters. So I think the first chapter is Little Richard singing America the Beautiful. Directly after that is chapter 2. And if you press chapter 2, you should see 10 minutes, 11 seconds. And that'll be kind of the start of Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. So, George, how are you? Are you all set with WrestleMania 10 in front of you? And are you? Do you have the time mark in front of you? 10 minutes, 11 seconds.
I did have it actually at 12 minutes 34 seconds because they were already done their entrances, but 10 minutes 11 seconds. I'm working it back.
We will watch the entrances. We'll kind of live through the excitement of the entrances. Of course, you've got the great Howard Finkel there doing all of the ring announcements, so we can't miss that.
No, for sure. So are we allowed to have audio up on this, or?
So we'll have it silent, and we'll add the color to it.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm at 10 minutes 11 seconds. I'm ready.
Wonderful. So on the count of, I'm going to count backwards from 3, and then when I get to 1, we will press play, and then we will watch the classic match, your favorite match of all time, from WrestleMania 10, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. So make sure that I've got it all queued up here. So yes, for the listeners listening at home, the WWE Network, WrestleMania 10, skip to the Bret Hart versus Owen Hart chapter, 10 minutes and 11 seconds. And after the count of 3, we'll press play and we'll watch together this extraordinary WrestleMania opening match. So 3, 2, 1, play. So there we go. So we get a big wide shot there, George, of Madison Square Garden. And it's not Howard Finkel.
It's not. It's actually the world's worst mullet.
Indeed. But I know Howard Finkel was part of WrestleMania 10, and of course he had an incredible hairpiece, if I remember rightly, because Cy Sperling, the CEO of Hair Club for Men, was there as one of the celebrities, and Howard Finkel was sporting a toupee, but not here. But we've got Owen out first, and of course with Madison Square Garden, certainly the way they had it back in 94 and all the years prior to that, they had the short entrance on the side of the arena. I think if you go to WrestleMania 20, they used the sideways kind of entrance with a big long ramp. But here you've got the classic MSG short arena, short entrance. Have you ever been to MSG, or is it an arena that you would like to go and see wrestling events in one day, George?
I mean, that's an arena that literally stands the test of time. I mean, so many great moments have happened at that arena in the business of wrestling that I would love to go there in a heartbeat. 100%.
Indeed, yeah. And you've got Owen here. Now, I know during the early stages of his feud with Bret, he did start to kind of replicate his ring gear to match his brothers, and he came out with the Hitman shades as well, which you can see him kind of ripping up into small pieces, kissing them, throwing away. He's getting lots of jeers, lots of boos from the New York fans there. And
well, it's a split crowd. I mean, this was a time period when it was a very, very split crowd. And now we're getting to see, here comes the Hitman out. There's the pink lighting, right? It's all there. He's coming out. The only thing Owen didn't have when he came out was, Bret wrestled in the tights with the unitard on. Yeah. Owen had the straight unitard, and Bret had this was weird because Bret always had just a regular jacket, but this was more like a leather, almost like a leather tuxedo jacket, if you will, because it's all the way down past the knees. And I mean, still Bret the Hitman Hart, man. He's coming out. They're both looking in the best shape of their lives. They're both looking ready to go. And I love it because at the time, I mean, this is when, U.S. and Canada were hand in hand, right? Nobody was beefing with anybody. So you see the Canadian flags flying right?
Quite a
And
few
you hear how
Canadian
loud
flags there.
that crowd is, man.
Yeah.
That crowd is so loud.
Yeah, it's a fantastic atmosphere, and you can only imagine being there. WrestleMania 10, its 10th anniversary, and kicking off with a main event caliber kind of lineup, really. And like I say, we've explained the build-up, we've explained the feud, how it happened from Survivor Series through to the Royal Rumble, through to this match. So this had an excellent build. So as a fan, thinking back, I was highly anticipating this match. I was really, really looking forward to this one. Almost a little bit disappointed, kind of harping back to our conversation earlier, that it was going on first, because this was the match that everybody was looking forward to. It kind of makes sense when you play, the whole pay-per-view from beginning to end, especially with how it concludes. You got Earl Hebner there, kind of setting the ground rules for the
Well, look
match,
at
and
Owen. You see Owen? He's just
pacing.
pacing. All he
Yeah,
wants Hebner to do is stop talking and ring the damn bell.
yeah,
Just ring the bell. And that's what everyone in the arena is doing the same thing. Ring,
yeah.
there we go. Now the bell's been
The
rung.
atmosphere is electric in the MSG, and yeah, you kind of compare it to arenas nowadays, and you just don't seem to have the same fan interaction as you did back in the 90s and here in 1994. And you kind of compare it to the Attitude Era, when you had all the signs and the raucous crowds. But nowadays, the wrestling fans seem to be a bit more tame. The events when they did have fans in them up until recently, and everything's on lockdown, were a lot more tame and not as much fan interaction back in the 90s. And maybe it's because this was the year when I was really getting into wrestling as a fan, and I remember it so fondly. But the fans just seemed a lot more engaged, a lot louder, a lot more into the action. What would you say to that, George?
I would completely agree with you. This was WrestleMania 10. This was done in Madison Square Garden. This was done in an arena that houses 25, 30,000 people. WWE hasn't done arena shows since, I want to say, WrestleMania 23. They've stepped away from, sports arenas and gone to the big, big, big stadiums, the football stadiums.
Yeah.
And you lose so much. You think about how much revenue it drives up for the city. Absolutely, they make their money. 100% for sure. But what they lose out is how much a fan really has to pay. The average, when I went to SummerSlam, for my wife, my daughter, and myself, we sat in the row beside the ramp. We picked row 14. We were going to be right at the edge of the ramp. My daughter would have been able to shake hands. When we got there, they moved us up to row number 3, but they stuck us on the end. I sat in front of the ring post. My wife and my daughter could barely see. We couldn't get through to touch any of the wrestlers. We did get some decent pictures, but if you think about it, $1,500, and all I got to show for it is 3 chairs sitting in my basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think about the money that you pay. And the worst part about it was I was sitting on the end, and they had the stupid crane camera coming back and forth. Literally killed the whole mojo of the night. And also, plus being in front of that ring post, I could barely see the finishes because everything finished center of the ring.
Yeah.
So you lose so much interaction, whereas these close environments, the way they did it back in the old school, it was so clean, so cut, and the fans could really watch and enjoy. And now you can't. Now it's just seeing how many butts you could fill in an arena, charge ridiculous prices. On top of that, the meet and greets, all the pop-up interviews, everything that happens that weekend or that week these major events are going on. It's great for the city, but it's just not the same as it used to be. I mean, I've been a fan my whole life and I love the business, but WWE has changed, and unfortunately not changed for the better. And I'll put my stamp on that.
Yeah. So I mean, we're a few minutes into this match here, and there's a lot of exchanges of holds, lots of reversal of holds, working over the arm there. Bret is
Well,
working over Owen's arm. Lots of
don't you
back
think
and
this
forth at the
reminds
moment.
you of? Well, this reminds you of everything that's going on in the dungeon, everything that went down in the Hart's basement.
Yeah.
This is probably a day of training for these two guys. They know each other so well.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is that they can dissect each hold. Like right now, he's got him in a classic traditional armbar. He's putting pressure on the shoulder, putting pressure in the armpit, and squeaking back on the elbow. But Owen, yeah, he's in pain, but he's trying, see right there, he's trying to shift out of it, trying to move his foot towards the rope. Because why? These two guys have fantastic ring awareness. Anywhere in the ring, they can find the rope to break the hold. But as he turns around, now we go into an attritional, wrist lock. You got it behind the back. It's clean, it's simple. Boom, right there. Way to get out. Elbow to the face, and classic Irish whip shoulder drop. And look how fast these two were moving. Look at that. Did you look at that sequence? And look,
Yeah, so
everyone in
smooth,
the
isn't it?
arena is going apeshit. And that was just a classic, simple sequence. Owen goes over the top, everybody gets a breather, and boom. But that was a minute and a half of nothing but speed and just amazing wrestling ability.
Yeah. So Owen's out of the ring there, but Bret chases after him, throws him back into the ring under the bottom rope. So the first few minutes was quite scientific and quite technical, but I got a feeling that if I remember rightly, the tone of the match is going to change fairly soon.
Oh yeah, right now
So
it's
a
just,
bit of a
hey,
shoving
I'm
contest now.
oh, there we go, slap to the face. He goes for the classic roll, and no, you're not going to beat him like that. And then see, this is what Bret does, right? He knows he can't beat Owen's speed. He can't. Out of the two, Owen is faster, 150%. So what's
Yeah.
Bret doing? He's breaking the body down. He's going after that same arm because that's the primary arm when you're doing the sharpshooter, because both of their finisher was the sharpshooter. Owen's predominantly left-handed. Bret is right-handed. So Bret's trying to break down the left hand to stop the sharpshooter at the end. And then, look at that. What was that? Almost like a Hurricane Rana, but into a sunset flip, I guess you'd
Yeah, it's
say.
kind of like a crucifix pinning attempt, wasn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, something along the lines of that, but right back on the left elbow, right back on the left arm, breaking him down. That's what the Harts were known for, man. They would dissect bodies. And when you have a Hart going against a Hart, what are you going to do? Whoever can get the drop on the other one, they have to dissect and break down the body. But again, as much as Bret has the power, I'll give Bret, in this match, Bret has the power for sure. Bret's stronger than Owen. Owen's got the agility and the speed. Look at that.
Yeah.
Right under the chin.
And that was one of Owen's trademark moves, was the kind of leg lariat, and
Yeah.
he's got the upper hand now. Bret's on the canvas, he's stomping away on Bret underneath the bottom rope there, and that's it. Owen is a happy man at the moment. He's got the upper hands.
And every time he points at himself, I just see him like 3 years later saying, "I'm not a nugget," just because it's so much intensity. And here we go. Now he's going to use the outside for a bit. Why? Because he's got the count of 10. Boom, back into the ring post. You see, now he's working on Bret's lower back because he knows that when he tries to go for that sharpshooter attempt, he can, if that lower back's already in pain,
Yeah.
he can utilize that to his advantage. And that's what the great thing about wrestling was back then. This is a simple story. It's not flashy. It has its moments of speed. It has its moments of slowing things down. Each wrestler gets a moment to breathe, but it's just the simple fact of literally brother going after brother, knowing each other so well, training each other, wrestling at Stampede Wrestling. They can break each other down 50,000 ways. And who, honestly, John, who knows you better than your family?
Indeed.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody knows you better than your family, except your wife or your husband.
Yeah.
Male or female, depending, right? I mean, your wife's going to know you a lot more intimately than your sister would know you, for sure.
Yeah, but you mentioned about Owen going after Bret's back and slamming him into the turnbuckle on the outside. Now he's got him in like a cobra clutch, really applying pressure, really cranking back, and
using the hair for the count of 4.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But no, you were spot on that he's going after Bret Hart's back there, and but still a fairly, not lightning quick, a steady pace, and they're telling a story. And Owen Hart catching Bret
belly to
Hart off
belly.
the ropes, beautiful belly to belly, getting a 2 count there. So yeah, already they're going for the win. There's been a couple of 2 counts already, but this what we're maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes in. And they've not put a foot wrong. It's been a beautiful dance between the two.
Look at that. Did you see that? Caught himself on the second rope. Reverse cross body into a pin. And then right back in the attack. That's what I'm saying about the agility of Owen Hart is unmatched in this match. The agility of Owen Hart, especially going against his brother. This is a match where, to me, this is where I became a fan of Owen Hart. The build up to this match, during this match, everything about the way Owen Hart performed, and who better to be your dance partner with than your brother? Arguably, hands down, this is why I urged fans earlier to stop, watch the match, then come back and watch with us.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
They can see everything we're talking about. And look at that. He was going probably for a scoop slam or a sidewalk slam. Bret using the knees on the side.
His weight. Yeah.
Shifted his weight, breaking down. And now, see, that's how good they are. Owen's in the ring. He's pandering the crowd. Bret's outside, catches his breath. That's when you know you got a good dance partner in the ring. Gives you a chance to catch your breath while the other one puts you in. Now we're going to try to go in for like a suplex power slam and the reversal. And see, look at that. Boom. Again, the speed of Owen Hart is completely unmatched.
Yeah. Well, I
It's
think
just incredible.
what a lot of people may not know is that before he joined the WWF back in, I think he joined about 87 as the Blue Blazer. He spent quite a few years in New Japan in their junior heavyweight division and wrestled all the greats there from Jushin Liger. And I think he even took part in quite a few. I don't know if they had a Best of the Super Junior tournaments back then, but I know that Owen Hart was a celebrated junior heavyweight champion over in New Japan. And, you mentioned about his pace and his agility, and he's got so many different style variations as well. I mean, using a European uppercut there and the technical style, the high flying, the pace. He could do it all, really, couldn't he? Owen Hart was, the wrestler's wrestler, you could say.
He 100% was, and he could shift his style to whoever he had in the ring. And we just saw that there. We just saw the reverted, almost looked like a reverted, I don't know, a coffee grinder, if you will, like a dance maneuver, flipped over the shoulder into the tombstone, going for the flying headbutt, and he missed it. But because he sold it so well, gave Bret a chance to recover. Had he gone right from the flying headbutt and not pander to the crowd, and that's what I love about Owen Hart. His ego always got the best of him. If he had a chance to pander to the crowd, especially when he turned heel, he 100% would. He was one of the guys that could literally get a reaction out of anybody. Any single person in the ring, from a newborn baby to an 80-year-old woman, he could gain a reaction.
Yeah.
And there we go. Boom. Atomic drop. Going in for the clothesline. What a clothesline. Did you see
that was solid. And knocked him out of his boots practically. But,
man, almost took
Bret
his
gets
head
a 2 count
clean
there.
off. And now we see Bret starting to get a little dirty with pulling the hair, right? So it's almost like, all right, you want to play dirty, I'll play dirty. Boom. So again, I don't know what they call that exactly. That
side Russian leg sweep, I think.
But almost a reversed Russian leg sweep, if you will, because it lands on the back of the head instead of the face. So then you go, and now we're going into a sidewalk slam, backdrop actually. Could have been a sidewalk slam.
So the pace of the match is noticeably quickening. It's definitely getting a quicker pace now. Bret Hart's kind of back on top, definitely laying in some offense there to Owen. And
did you see that there? Did you see that there? That half-ass pin attempt? You know who you're in the ring with a bit. Show your brother a little bit of respect. Don't just do the half-ass pin attempt. Hook the leg. Put pressure on the shoulders like you're supposed to. Catches the leg drop, boom. Kick to the side temple. I tell you, man, Owen Hart. And now, look, we're going to set up for the sharpshooter. See all that pressure on the lower back? Oh, but who knows how to reverse it better than the Hitman? And there you go. This is my favorite part of the match. This is one of the spots I love. See, nobody can put the other one into sharpshooter because they know how to get out of it 50 different ways.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of part of the story of the match is, each of them wanting to apply the sharpshooter on the other. Wow, Owen Hart and nearly getting a pin from, I'm not sure how you would describe that, to be honest with you, but...
almost like I want to say like a mid-ring, low-grade Hurricane Rana into just a roll-up, into a classic roll-up. But see, now again, Bret, you got the knee injury into play.
So you're selling the left knee.
Mm-hmm. And with the left knee out now, and with the lower back problems, there's no way in hell he can apply the sharpshooter with full pressure.
Yeah,
no way at all.
Selling the knee injury, that obviously plays into the build to this match as well, because, there was obviously Bret Hart selling a knee injury at the Survivor Series, and then again, the match having to be stopped against the Quebecers at the Royal Rumble, the pay-per-view prior to this one. So, it's good storyline continuity, and that was something that Bret Hart was always excellent at doing, was telling a story, and harking back to things that have happened in prior matches, which I think is a bit of a lost art nowadays.
Right, and then again, classic. What does a classic heel do? Season injury, season opening, goes after it. So now Owen, remembering the knee injury, now he's attacking it. We got him doing everything from snapping it back. Now he's going to whack it against the side ring post. But see, this is the difference between wrestlers nowadays and these classic guys. They're selling it, I feel, so much better. Even though this match is almost 30 years old, I still get the feels. I still cringe when he whacks his knee against that side post twice. I still, and then look at that. Look at how he's selling it. He's breathing heavy. He's stumbling. He's walking. And Owen's going right back in the attack. And
Yeah,
look, oh,
he's like a
that was
shark.
a great.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, the artistry of these two ultimate pros essentially. And I think, one thing that niggles at me regarding Owen Hart is I think he was massively underrated when,
Oh, so underrated, man.
had they have realised what they had in Owen Hart, maybe, what do you think his ceiling could have been? I mean, we know that they go on to have a classic cage match at SummerSlam, so the pay-per-view after this one, and that many people would consider to be a better match than this one, believe it or not. But that was for the WWF Championship because at that point, and of course following WrestleMania, Bret Hart would hold the gold. So that
I
match
would have
at
had Owen
SummerSlam,
win it. I would have had Owen win it,
yeah,
and I would have had
that
Owen
was a
go
lost
on a
opportunity, though, George. Do you think that was a lost opportunity that they
hundred
didn't kind of
percent.
pull the trigger on Owen at SummerSlam?
I think they should have let him win it, and then I would have let him go on a 1.5 year title run. I would have let him get a long title run in him, beat his brother, then come back and end up losing to his brother.
Yeah.
That's the way I would have told that story. They could have built this for a year. Bret loses the title at SummerSlam. He has to work his way all the way up the ranks. Keeps getting shot down because Owen would interfere at every match when he had a chance to become number one contender. Eventually has to win it at Royal Rumble, wins the Royal Rumble. Then at WrestleMania 11, we have, or not, sorry, at this point I would say WrestleMania 12 now. WrestleMania 12, we'd have Bret versus Owen for the title. And that I would have done a 60-minute Iron Man match. Even though the one with Shawn Michaels following year at WrestleMania 12 was spectacular, I would have done WrestleMania 11, or I would have done that as the main event instead of Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
I would have done Shawn Michaels the next year.
Yeah.
But I would have had Owen Hart go Bret Hart, last man standing, or 60-minute Iron Man match. Hands down, 1.5 year title run after winning it at SummerSlam. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, I mean, something we'll probably talk about after this match, George, but after Bret Hart and Owen Hart's feud, unfortunately, Owen Hart kind of, fizzled back down to the mid-card position, really, and wasn't as prevalent on the WWF scene compared to what he was here when he was feuding with his brother for that year-long feud. But, I mean, going back to the match, I mean, Owen just had a figure four leg lock on Bret, which Bret reversed. So they're both kind of selling injuries now, and the match is easily a good 10 to 12 minutes long. And,
but see, they've told stages. There's been layers to this match. Sorry to interrupt and cut you off. The first match was technical. The first part of the match was very technical. Holds, breaking down your opponent. The second part was speed and agility. Who was faster? Now we're just getting into straight brawling. Headbutts,
right. It's
punches.
More of a fight now. More of a fight.
Now it's just a fight. It's not about wrestling anymore. It's not about getting the upper hand. It's about a fight. And now you can see Owens trying to sell the gas, which sets up the finish perfectly. And this is where, the black heart really comes to play because he gets the better of his brother near the end. See, but again, the no respect pins from Bret Hart. That's what I think pushes Owen to the finish that eventually happens, where Owen kind of gets the cheap, kind of quick, cheating pin. And this is what we have. And Bret still trying to, but let's see again. Oh, that was nice. That was a nice pile driver.
Yeah, that's a move you don't see too often nowadays.
That was
good old-fashioned pile driver, well executed as well.
So clean. But again, a half-ass pin, and it's showing no respect to your opponent. No respect to your opponent. You gotta when you're facing somebody of the caliber of Owen Hart or Bret Hart, you gotta show respect. Like, I'm hoping we see a pin attempt here by Owen, because if we do, I guarantee you every pin attempt from Owen has been a hook or a roll up to try to put pressure on the legs. And now, uncharacteristically, you've got Bret Hart going to the top. Never goes top rope. Never. And boom.
Oh.
What? Oh, man.
That was a top rope superplex. I think many people used to call it a suicide plex, but just an amazing move. And Bret getting a very, very close near fall there on Owen. And
I give him a 2.5 there. I think Earl Hebner sold the stretch out a little bit, but it was a 2.5 count for sure. He almost had it there. But now Owen, they're both gassed. At this point now, I think we've been going for close to 12 minutes?
Sure.
No, we're at 32 minutes here. So we're almost near the end because this started at 10:11. They've been going for 22 minutes right now. 22 minutes, including entrances. So I want to say 20 minutes they've been going at this point.
Yeah.
But the story that's been told, like I said, 20 minutes, you want to put 7-minute markers on every stage of this match. Now they're both gassed. Owen's going for the win. Now we got a sleeper hold. And look at the ring awareness by, see? But there you go. That's the black card right there. There's the cheap shot.
Yeah.
I don't like it, but I respect it. I completely respect it.
But you look at the faces of the fans, and they're so enjoying this. They're so into the action. There's the sharpshooter from Owen using Bret's own move against him. And of course, when Owen started his rivalry with Bret, he kind of stole Bret's sharpshooter move, along with his similar looking attire and the glasses. So Owen really wanted to be the better.
Was that a tap?
It looked like it, didn't it? That's why I paused.
It did, but I'm like, that's not where it ends. See, no. Like, Bret knows how to get out of the sharpshooter. And look at that. From the floor, now he's going to put Owen in. But he's near the ropes.
Too close to the ropes.
Too close to the ropes for that.
And even watching it without any audio, without any volume, without the commentary, you can feel the excitement. We're really getting into the match just talking about it, and it brings back so many fond memories of watching this the first time round, and I've seen it tens of times since. But here we go. Bret Hart up on Owen's shoulders, going for the victory roll, but Owen traps Bret for the 1, 2, 3, and there we go. And that was a surprising ending. That was a surprising. I don't think many people really had Owen Hart pegged as a possible winner in this match, and Bret Hart looking very disappointed. So it's a bit. I
can remember yelling at all my cousins.
It was a shocking outcome.
Yeah, I remember yelling at all my cousins when this happened, because they were all cheering for Bret. But as the match went on, I levitated towards Owen. And when this happened at the end, I remember literally whipping my oldest cousin in the face with a pillow and saying, "I told ya, I told ya." And then look at Bret Hart. He's kind of he sells it so well. He's disappointed that he lost the match, but I think more so he just wants it to be over, wants this whole thing to be over with his brother. But as we all know, it's not going to be.
But Owen selling the exhaustion, selling the effects of the match.
The little spit bubble at the side of his mouth.
Oh, yeah. And here's a replay of the finish. And this is very similar, I think, if I remember rightly. We recently did a review of SummerSlam 92. And I seem to remember that this was a similar ending to that match when Davey Boy Smith won the Intercontinental title by trapping Bret from a similar victory roll, if I remember rightly. But
and I think that's why Owen did it.
Yeah.
Because that was SummerSlam 92. This was WrestleMania 94, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of why it's a little bit of sting, right? Because, that's the time when you lost to your brother-in-law. So now you just relive it and sting. But, man, I tell you, what a match. And the fact that Bret's still out there. Oh, but here's the great Owen promo.
Yeah. And as a heel, he cut so many passionate, heartfelt promos. But I did it, Bret. I did it. I beat you. And on top of the world there. But I think Owen's world came crashing down after the main event when Bret was there celebrating with all the wrestlers as the new WWF champion. And that kind of just made him even more angry and even more vengeful. And of course, following WrestleMania, the next pay-per-view, of course, we mentioned SummerSlam, but of course the next pay-per-view was King of the Ring. And Bret Hart won the first ever King of the Ring the year prior, 1993. But this year, 1994, following WrestleMania, Owen Hart was the King of the Ring. He won the tournament to crown the new King of the Ring. That made him kind of the automatic number one contender for Bret's championship to then go on and face Bret in that steel cage match at SummerSlam. Obviously, other family members got involved during that time. I think Jim Neidhart came back into the fold, having previously worked for the WWF back in 92. Here in 94, I think he came out to be the corner man for Bret Hart. I think it was during this time. But he ended up siding with Owen Hart and aligning with Owen Hart, who had the heel combo of Jim Neidhart and Owen Hart, kind of almost taking it to Bret Hart through the summer of 1994, through to their steel cage match. But what were your memories kind of post WrestleMania, of kind of the Owen and Bret feud. And of course, you had the King of the Ring tournament. Owen became king, and then you had their SummerSlam match. We've already spoken about what an epic. That was a 5-star Dave Meltzer kind of 5-star match. One of the very few 5-star matches he gave the WWF back in those days. But any memories post WrestleMania of their feud and how it continued?
Well, I mean, I honestly thought, I mean, this was when I was, like I said, I was, at this point, I was 10 going on 11. I was so into wrestling at this point. You couldn't talk to me about anything else but basketball or wrestling. And even to this day, you can't talk to me about anything else but basketball or wrestling. The King of the Ring was, the way I saw the build happening was just, okay, Owen beats Bret at WrestleMania. Now Owen wins the King of the Ring.
Yeah.
Logical choice for me, like I said, was Owen winning at SummerSlam. Never letting it happen. Still, to this day, I mean, I appreciate the steel cage match at SummerSlam. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a steel cage match. What's not to love about a steel cage match, especially when it's brother versus brother?
Yeah.
This is upping the ante from WrestleMania 10. Okay, I'll lay that out right now to you. But the thing that breaks it down for me, and the reason why I like WrestleMania 10 a little bit more, is probably because the stages of the match that we spoke about, but also for the fact that Owen got the win. And I think that's why WrestleMania 10 resonates with me a little bit more. Again, I love Bret Hart to no avail. He's a part of my childhood. If I was playing wrestling with the kids in the playground, you're always fighting over, at the time, 94, 95, you're fighting over Undertaker, Bret the Hitman Hart, and Shawn Michaels. You're fighting over those three guys, who's going to play who. And luckily enough, I always got Bret Hart. But, I just thought this whole year-long plus feud, you do this whole build, you set it up the right way. Owen should have won at SummerSlam. And anybody that disagrees with me, no problem. That's your opinion, but come and defend it to me. Because I'll break it down to you like this. You have the guy beat him at WrestleMania, hands down. Okay, it was a clean victory. Other than the cheap shot, the low blow, Owen did everything by the book in that match. Everything by the book in that match. You have him go on to be the King of the Ring. You set him up to give him a title shot against his brother at SummerSlam. You put the two of them in a cage. Why not finish the storyline? You keep having Owen go up in this upward spiral. So why not continue the trend? Even if you have Owen win by kind of shadiness, like having the referee get knocked down, then maybe Jim Neidhart comes out and he knocks out Bret and pulls Owen out of the cage. Right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Have that work, but they don't. Again, typical WWE fashion, building the storyline greatly and then screwing up the end.
Yeah.
Almost like what they did with The Fiend at Super Showdown. I pose this question to you. Let's go modern here for a second. Do you think Goldberg deserved to beat The Fiend at Super Showdown?
No. 100% no. I do not believe he should have beaten The Fiend at Super Showdown.
Do you think that it ruined the mystique of The Fiend?
It did hurt the mystique of The Fiend. It did. It didn't help the character development that they were trying to portray with The Fiend. I think it did more harm than good, definitely.
100%. It ruined the character. You build this character up to literally be untouchable. You have him go through all the motions of everything he's going through. You have it so it's quite simply should have been The Fiend versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. But then you pull out, you give the title to Goldberg. Roman Reigns pulls out because of his immunity deficiency with leukemia, and he wants to stay home with his family. And I get that, and I respect it. I'm not a big Roman Reigns fan, but I respect the man for what he did. You slide the obvious replacement of Braun Strowman in the match. Could you have imagined Braun Strowman in a Firefly Funhouse match? That would have been fucking fantastic.
Absolutely.
Don't get me wrong. John Cena versus The Fiend was that, and the Boneyard match were probably my two favorite matches of this year's WrestleMania. But the fact is once you build something up in an upward spiral, to literally have it culminate in not the decision that the fans are expecting. Even every fan at SummerSlam, and that SummerSlam was going for Bret. You could hear it in the crowd. You could hear it in the audience. They were going for Bret. That crowd was not a split crowd. That crowd was a Bret Hart crowd.
Yeah.
So why in the hell would you not build on that? And don't tell me back in the day Vince McMahon never did that, because there were times where the bad guy won, i.e. Razor Ramon beating Shawn Michaels. WrestleMania 10, that was a Shawn Michaels crowd. But who won? Razor. Yeah. So that's my whole point. WWE does these things right sometimes and does them horribly wrong. SummerSlam 94, I'll put my stamp on it. You can quote me on this. This is going to go out live when you release this episode. They got it wrong.
Yeah.
150% over. They got it wrong.
Another reason why I believe that they got it wrong is because although their feud, Bret and Owen, it continued beyond SummerSlam into Survivor Series and then Royal Rumble 95, Owen's singles career never really reached the same heights as it did WrestleMania 10, Madison Square Garden, as we've just kind of commentated through. And it was, he had tag team success with Davey Boy Smith and with Yokozuna, and that was all great. And he had other WrestleMania moments, mostly in tag team matches. But, even as a transitional champion, maybe up until the next pay-per-view, or maybe up until, Royal Rumble, or possibly save it until WrestleMania 11, they had an opportunity to capitalize on the character that was Owen Hart. And, this was the era when they were trying to promote the new generation and the new talent coming through. To stick it to WCW, they had the likes of Shawn Michaels and the Razor Ramones and the Undertakers, and Bret Hart to a large degree was considered part of the new generation. But Owen Hart never quite reached that ceiling that the other characters did. And like I say, this was an amazing feud, a year-long feud, a fantastic match at WrestleMania. They should have pulled the trigger on Owen at SummerSlam, and they didn't. And I think that Owen's career was never the same, will never reach the same heights again after this 1994 encounter.
I think this, unfortunately, was the peak of Owen's career in WWE, and that's sad to say because of how loyal he was. Even with everything that was done to his brother at the Montreal Screwjob, he still stayed the course.
Yeah.
He still stayed loyal to Vince McMahon, to the company, did everything in reason. And, for a long time when Owen Hart passed away, I blamed Vince Russo. I completely and utterly blamed Vince Russo until I started doing the podcast. And we actually did a shoot job on Vince Russo. And there was an interview where he was called by Bruce Pritchard. And, hey, we got these guys. They do the rappelling and shit for Sting and WCW. Yeah. They want to come down. They want to do it. What do you think? Can we work it in? Yeah, okay. Blue Blazer could do it as he's coming down. They did do a test run that day. Everything went right. And then, unfortunately, they did the test run without the cape. The cape comes into play. Owen crashes to his death.
Yeah.
And you have everybody, including myself at the time, so angry and bitter at Vince Russo. But then I hear that audio clip, and listen, everybody knows Vince Russo talks a lot of shit. Yeah. Just like everybody knows Jim Cornette talks a lot of shit. The only good thing about Jim Cornette and Vince Russo is that we know what their breaths smell like. It smells like shit. But this time, they got it right. This time, you can't blame Russo. You can't even blame Vince McMahon. What you can blame is an ill-timed costume decision on a cape. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that one of the greatest wrestlers of all time career was cut so short when he probably had another 10 or 12 years in him.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It sucks. It's not right. It's not fair. But I look at matches like this, and they stand the test of time. Vince McMahon's an idiot. He never utilized the talent he had properly. And we've seen it where talent has left him and flourished. Perfect example, every member of three-man band other than Heath Slater.
Yeah.
Jinder Mahal leaves, comes back stronger, leaner, definitely on steroids. I don't give a shit what he says. Wins the title.
Yeah.
Drew McIntyre goes away, comes back. Now he's a champion. It just sucks that he's carrying the company in a time where revenue is all over the place.
Yeah.
But what I will say about Vince McMahon is this. As much as I loathe everything about him now and the storylines that he's done and built and portrayed, this is the man that gave us a sport that we all love.
Yeah.
This is a man that did everything for all of us. So now we could bitch about him later. And as wrestling fans, that's just our God-given right, is to bitch and complain. But I will say this 110%. Do I agree with all the decisions Vince McMahon makes? Hell no. Do I respect Vince McMahon now? Hell no. Do I respect the product and the business that he created? 100%. And when Vince McMahon goes, whenever that time period may be, I will salute him. But when it comes to Owen Hart, I will always 150% say he was never utilized properly, and Vince McMahon got it completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. George, let me ask you, when people talk about classic or all-time great wrestling feuds, people go to Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. People go to Austin versus The Rock or Austin McMahon or Flair versus Steamboat and so on and so forth. Not many people automatically go to this feud, Bret versus Owen. Now, we've just kind of spoken at length about the build from Survivor Series 93, Royal Rumble, all the way through to WrestleMania, the steel cage match at SummerSlam, and the feud continued through the latter part of 94 into the early part of 95. But not many people kind of automatically think Bret versus Owen as a classic all-time feud. Now, fans of Bret and Owen, like the two of us, would go to a feud like this, but it's not on everybody's kind of lips as an automatic feud that people would go to when they're talking about classic rivalries. Why do you think that is?
Because unfortunately, I think they're uneducated. They're fans that grew up in the wrong time period. A lot of fans who recognize Austin and McMahon or the Rock and Austin, like you mentioned, those were Attitude Era kids. You and I were teenagers in the Attitude Era. So as much as we appreciate the Attitude Era, we remember all the great things about the Attitude Era. But do you remember all the bad things? I do. I remember the mics cutting out. I remember how loud and dirty those arenas were. I remember not a good promo coming out at all. I remember Chris Jericho wearing a poof looking like a Shih Tzu. I remember all the bad that was in the Attitude Era as much as I remember the good. But there was so much in the bad. Just like there was so much bad in the Ruthless Aggression Era, but there was so much good.
Yeah.
So you got to take the good with the bad. But for me, this is a feud that stands the test of time. Any of those fans that recognize the other feuds, I challenge you all to this. Watch the feud that John and I just outlined.
Yeah.
Go page for page, match for match, the storyline from beginning to end. Go all the way from Survivor Series 93 all the way to Survivor Series 94. See it, live it, understand it. Then come back and watch it against your favorite feud. See which one resonates and holds more true with you. I think brother versus brother stands the test of time over ego versus ego.
Exactly.
All those other feuds you highlighted were ego versus ego, not brother versus brother. And I think that's why this feud for me resonates stronger than any of the other ones.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, you had the family interaction as well, whether it be the other brother, the Hart brothers, or Stu and Helen Hart, and how they were involved in especially when you think about Survivor Series 94, and I think Bret was taking on Mr. Bob Backlund for the WWF Championship, and Owen was on the outside, and he was begging his mother to throw in the towel. Do you remember that one? I mean, that's another classic kind of interaction in the Bret and Owen feud, and really get the mother involved. You mentioned about Helen, really kind of selling the inner turmoil that she must have been feeling with her two sons feuding, and that much once again, told a fantastic story both on the inside of the ring and the outside of the ring, and exactly portrayed what you were telling us earlier about how Stu and Helen and the rest of the Hart family were quite an important factor in this whole storyline, really.
100%. The fact that the whole family was pulled in, it gave everybody a chance to get a little bit of camera time, make a little bit of money, didn't hurt anybody. But the fact is that's what I think resonates, because the whole family was pulled in. It wasn't a feud of just Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. This was a feud amongst the Hart family. This was WrestleTing royalty. This was the Hart family. Okay, the Hart family. And I say that twice because this was not a feud of just brother versus brother. This was an internal struggle for who was going to take over the family when Stu Hart and Helen Hart passed away.
Yeah.
That's the underlying message to the story. And this is also a little brother trying to find a way to get out from his older brother's shadow. I mean, what sibling hasn't? Me and my older sister, we used to go back and forth with stuff all the time. She was a dancer. I used to act when I was a kid. So I was always begging for our parents' attention of who did better, me in the school play or her at her dance recital. It was always those kind of competitions. But this was a competition that got taken to the extreme because they were trained by hands down one of the greatest grapplers of all time.
Yeah.
And again, I challenge anybody to challenge me with it because it's proven. Every wrestler that survived the dungeon has gone on to win a world title. If you were trained by Stu Hart, it was a pedigree for a championship. Indeed. Plain and simple.
Indeed. George, we just spoke for the last hour and a half about one of the greatest WrestleMania matches, one of the greatest matches of all time, your favourite match of all time, and one of the kind of unsung rivalries that many people don't kind of compare to, like say, the likes of the Rock and the Austins and the Flairs and the Steamboat feuds. But this one here, I think we've just demonstrated and we've spoken very, very passionately about why there should be a feud to go back and revisit from when it started back in late '93 through to the WrestleMania match and then on to that great SummerSlam match in the cage. But it's been a fantastic honour and a privilege and a pleasure to speak to you for the last 90 minutes, talking about a fantastic rivalry. And of course, we watched together from opposite sides of the Atlantic, WrestleMania 10, Bret versus Owen. So, George McKay, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on the Wrestling with Johners podcast, my friend.